it's my pleasure, our pleasure, to introduce John, our speaker.
Hey, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks, Tom. Steely Dan. Yeah, bunch of hippies here. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I live in Calabasas. I drove out with my beautiful wife tonight, and or as my friend from Ohio visited us about a decade ago. He was driving through Old Town Calabasas, and he got up to the house, and he said, "Such a lovely town you live in, Calabasas." So all the way from Calabasas, here we are, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I got sober at the Rodeo group, and I was 21 when I got sober. I'm 57 now, and I've been to a meeting every day since I've been sober. And what that means is, when I go to Japan, I double up my meeting when I land. When I get sick, I double up my meetings when I get better. I've been to a meeting every day of my sobriety, and it's incredible. AA is an incredible place, and it has completely transformed me. I got here at the Rodeo group. I was sitting on my hands, shaking, detoxing, watching the walls melt, and I saw all these people at Rodeo that were, in their fancy cars and their fancy clothes and their fancy faces, the whole thing. And I just thought these people did not drink like I drank, and I do not feel like that tonight. You guys drank like I drank, I can tell. This ain't Rodeo. Thank God. And the last place I ever drank was the Black Angus on this road. That's the last place I ever drank, as sexy as that is, I just love Alcoholics Anonymous. They told me to pick up a broom and sweep the floor. First meeting I went to, they said, stay after the meeting and sweep up the floor. And I just thought, how is that going to pay my rent? How is that going to get my girl back? Like, how is sweeping the floor at an AA meeting going to get my girlfriend back? But it's like, this is spiritual acupuncture, what we do here. We put the needle in the shoulder and our knee gets better. I swept up the floor. I figured out how to pay the rent. I never got that girl back. Thank God I didn't get that girl back. I went to my high school reunion and, I'll leave it there. I'll leave it there. I'm so grateful that I've been with my wife for 28 years, and it's like I don't know, I'm just, only because of AA. I mean, everything in my life should have a bumper sticker that says property of Alcoholics Anonymous. My car, my kids, my wife, everything in my life is property of AA, God says yes, not yet, or I've got something better in store. Every time. Yes, not yet. I've got something better in store. And if you're newer than me, with my 36 years of sobriety, all I can do is tell you that that's been the truth every single time. I was fired from Aardvarks when I was out there drinking, which is like, I don't know about your bottom, but there's no bottom lower than being fired from Aardvarks, man. It was like this used clothing store in Melrose, and it was like the Coke dealer for all of Melrose in the 80s was the manager, and I got fired, and it's like, I got, the second speaker I ever heard was John Kimball, and he's been my sponsor for 36 years. And he told me, he said, we're self-supporting through our own contributions in Alcoholics Anonymous. He said, you're 21 years old. You can't take money from your parents. You can't collect unemployment. Go be self-supporting through your own contributions and beg for that job back. And I went into that job, and I talked to Joe, the owner, and I said, I was 4 weeks sober. Is there any way you give me another chance at this job? And Joe gave me my job back at Aardvark, so miracles happen in AA. And because of that job, I got a better job at American Rag and a better job on the promenade selling shoes, in Santa Monica. And I'm just so grateful that I found you guys. I'm so grateful, I just go to meetings, and that's where I hear God. Whatever God is shows up here. It's like, I remember I travel a lot, and I was in New York City, and I was at the Mustard Seat at the bottom of this, apartment complex, and it was just a perfect AA meeting. It just smelled like a hybrid of, AA coffee and mold. I got there, and I'm like, I'm home, man. And it was a round robin style meeting, and half the meeting was going to work in their suits, and the other half were homeless. And it was just a perfect blend of just all, like all types, like we have in AA. And I was sitting there, and I was like 4 coffees in at 7 a.m., and I remember just sitting there going, when are they going to get to me? When are they going to get to me? And they get to this guy next to me, this homeless guy, and they get to him, and he says his name. He's so-and-so from Brooklyn, and he's got all of his clothes in this plastic bag underneath his seat, right? And I'm just thinking in my head, I'm like, what's this guy going to share that's going to I was judge, like whatever, observing. And I just he said his name. He said he's alcoholic, said he's from Brooklyn. He goes, and he said, AA is like McDonald's, is what he said. And I just thought, I was this vegan at the time. I'm like, what are you talking about? AA is like McDonald's. And he goes, NA, Narcotics Anonymous, is like Burger King. He said, Burger King is good, but it's never going to be McDonald's. Thanks for letting me share. And I was like, dude, that is the best share I have ever heard in an AA meeting. I'm like, and you never know, you put the needle in the shoulder and the knee gets better. It's just like this thing. And I don't know, I keep going to meetings and my life gets better. I was in Germany, a while back, and I couldn't find the meeting, and I was in the taxi trying to find this little, community center in the middle of Leipzig, Germany. And I finally find it, and I get there, and it ended up being a 2-hour-long German-speaking meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous with no timer and no break, right? The best kind. And so I'm sitting there, and I don't speak German, and I'm just trying to pay attention. And then they go around the room, and they get to me. Again, it was a round-robin style meeting, and I just said, hey, I'm John. I'm an alcoholic in English. And I just shared for 2 minutes in English about what was going on then, And then the next guy said his name and said he was an alcoholic in English. And he said, I want to take a vote to see if the rest of the meeting we can share in English for our American visitors, what he said, right? Like only in AA. And they took a vote. They all voted. Except this one German guy was like, 9. He was so pissed, just so pissed. And then they shared the rest of the meeting in the worst English ever. It was great. It was amazing, And it's just like AA is such a magical place, I just, they talk about resentment being the number one offender in the big book, right? And I had this resentment, man, and it just wouldn't go away. And I remember, the prescription in the big book is we pray for their health, happiness, success. Everything we want for us, we pray for them for 2 weeks is what the prescription is in the big book, right? And I wrote this big inventory, who it was, what they did, what areas of my life it affected and my part and what I could have done better. I wrote it all down, read it to my sponsor, and, it went away for a little bit, but it came back. This kid that I worked with, that I trained, I brought him from nothing, didn't know how to make a cup of coffee. I taught him everything about, I'm a music producer, and I just taught him everything. And he went out and he took all these clients of mine, and he just, talked so much shit about me. And it's just it went away for a minute, and then it came back. And I was at this meeting in Santa Barbara, and I shared about it. I'm like, man, I've written this inventory, and I prayed for this kid for 2 weeks. It's still there. And this old timer came up to me, and he said, because I was sharing about how I wanted to just get revenge, just get what he deserves, And the guy said, well, in AA, when we try and get even, we get even worse, is what he said to me. And man, that hit. I was like, man, if I hadn't been at that meeting and shared that, I wouldn't, I don't hear the solutions unless I come to the meetings to hear the solutions. My sponsor's really clear. He goes, you share your problems with me and you share your solutions at AA meetings. He's really clear about that. And anyway, so I kept praying for this kid, and he got, I went so hard to get this one project to produce. And I was praying for the kid at the same time, and he ended up getting the job that I was going for. And I kept praying for him. I just kept praying for his health, happiness, success, everything I wanted for me. I prayed for this kid, and then he went and got this producing gig, producing the Rolling Stones, right? When I was praying for this kid, I called my friend Peter Miller. I'm like, dude, I've been praying for this kid now for 4 months. He goes, stop praying for the kid. He hung up the phone. And I did. I feel way better, Way better. It's like, sometimes you just got to get the direction that you need from that guy at the meeting, And it's like, I don't know. God either says yes, not yet, or I've got something better in store, And that's been it. When I think about God and the idea of, turning my will and my life over to the care of a power greater than myself, I think about Bill's story, and I just think about that one phone call. He was 9 months sober. Nobody he helped got sober. He had met Ebby, been to the meetings of the Oxford group. He'd done all this stuff, but no one that he was helping was staying sober. But he was staying sober. And he's on tour he's like on this trip to Akron, Ohio, trying to find, investment opportunities for his highfalutin banker friends in New York. And he goes, and he's at this bar, he's at this hotel lobby, and he hears the people raging in this bar. And he makes the decision to not go in the bar, to go make a phone call to a clergyman to go put him in touch with an alcoholic. It's like whatever gave him that decision is what I choose to call God. Because that one decision that put him in touch with Dr. Bob, that have kept all of us sober for wherever long we've been sober, that have saved my life, that one decision he made saved my life. That's what I choose to call God. And I've been to Dr. Bob's house twice now. The first time I went there, I was in Cleveland working, and I just took a taxi to Akron, and I get to his house, and I got there at 4:30, and they close his house at 4, and I get there, and I'm like, I was with a friend of mine, and we just said, well, I looked in the window, I saw the first coffee pot ever in the window. I'm like, this is cool, whatever. And I sat on the porch swing with my friend, and when, two or more are gathered, we have an AA meeting, and it was me and my friend Paul, and we had an AA meeting right on Dr. Bob's porch. And it's like, I grew up in California, so these things happen in the Midwest where like these storms happen out of nowhere. And this raging storm came, and we were having this little AA meeting, and this lightning, like it was full-on lightning storm. And this lightning bolt hits the oak tree in Dr. Bob's front yard. The tree falls down, takes down all the power lines, and destroys his front yard. Destroys it. I just called central office. I'm like, dude, we're at Dr. Bob's house. His front yard's destroyed. It was, I don't know what this story has to do with much, except that I went to Dr. Bob's house, and I watched his front yard get destroyed. It was epic. And I don't know. I started drinking when I was 12. My dad was the last man in America to contract the polio virus. And, he used this virus he basically said, I'm going to combat this virus by getting a PhD in nuclear physics. This man became the smartest man I'd ever met, right? And he made me play the clarinet in the marching band in 7th grade, which is definitely why I'm alcoholic for sure. But it's like, we had a lot of adversity, me and this man, and it's not why I'm alcoholic. I'm bodily and mentally different than my fellows. And first time I got drunk, I was over in Santa Cruz, near where I grew up, and I was like, it was around a bonfire, Santa Ana winds in the middle of summer, and I was going into high school, and I blacked out the first time I drank, and I came to out of the blackout with, I was making out with this one girl that was a sophomore and one girl that was a junior at the same time. I'm like, I don't ever want to feel different than this, ever. Like I had arrived. Bill talks about, riding, his motorcycle with Lois on his sidecar in the motorcycle through Ohio, and it's like, he says, I had arrived. Like I had arrived that night. I didn't want to feel any different than the way I felt that night, And it's like I kept drinking it. They say fun with problems, and then just problems is the trajectory of alcoholics. And it was really, really fun in the beginning. And it was like I just ran rampant. I shaved my head, I put a safety pin in my ear, became this punk rock kid in the middle of the Bay Area. And I would just, smash windows and steal cars and, spray paint the walls. And it was just, I had so much fun in the beginning. And then they say fun with problems, and the problems came along, right? I got kicked out of high school when I was 16. When I was 17, I got a girl pregnant from a one-night stand and a two-night stand. I went back for seconds, and she got pregnant, and she had my daughter, who I didn't meet. I didn't show up. I wasn't there. I didn't know this woman. and I wasn't there. I wasn't present. So I had this big secret, you know. I had this big secret that, you know, I was at this continuation high school trying to figure out life. And then I started getting really sick. When I was 17, I got an ulcer. And then I went to the doctor, and they measured my liver, and they said, your liver's 3 centimeters bigger than it should be. You've got scarring of the liver and first stages of cirrhosis. I was 17. I've been drinking for 5 years. And he said, if you continue drinking the way you're drinking, you'll be dead before you're 30. And I was 17 at the time, and I just thought, like, who would ever want to live to be 30, ever, you know? And he suggested AA, and I went to one meeting. All my mom's sisters were sober, so I knew about AA, and my mom took me to this meeting in San Jose, a young people's meeting, and I get there with my leather jacket and my combat boots, this little punk rock kid, and I judged everything about you by the kind of music you listen to, right? And everyone there had long hair and these 8th grade mustaches and Led Zeppelin t-shirts. I'm like, these are not my people at all. And then they said, are there any newcomers? And I was with my mom because I wasn't driving, and then she nudged me, and I said, I'm John, I'm probably alcoholic. And then she stood up and said, I'm Sue, and I'm John's mom. And I'm like, I'm never coming back ever to AA. This is ridiculous. And I didn't. For 9 months, I stayed dry on my own. I didn't have AA. I wasn't drinking. And they say a surefire sign of alcoholism is if you stop drinking and your problems get worse. And that's exactly what happened. I started getting, panic attacks, and I became agoraphobic. I couldn't leave my room. I couldn't look myself in the eye in the mirror. I hated who I was. I would just say, I hate you in the mirror. I would cut myself with razor blades, like just dry as a bone. Hated who I was. And like the book talks about, if I have a glass of milk with my shot of whiskey, it'll be different this time. It'll be different this time. It was the people I was hanging out with. It was the alcohol I was drinking. It was the combination of drugs that I had. It was, and so like that book says, I said, if I have Absolute vodka and imported beer, my liver's going to be just fine. That's what I thought. And after 9 months of being dry, I drank again. And it was like my disease progressed even though I wasn't drinking over that 9 months. I picked up that drink, blacked out, came to in San Diego in my Dodge Dart with my car on the sand, fiberglass with my engine on fire, and I'm pissing all over the engine to try and put the fire out. That's how I come to after 9 months of being dry, right? And I start going crazy now. I'm living in San Diego. I'm going to Tijuana every weekend, and I'm reading that No One Here Gets Out Alive book by Jim Morrison, and I think I'm this Jim Morrison character reincarnated, but everything I had, all my clothes I'd bought in Tijuana, I was wearing like a leather vest on with a bolo tie with no shirt, and I had leather pants and cowboy boots, and I looked nothing like Jim Morrison. I looked like a fat, bloated, drunk Bret Michaels is exactly what I look like, exactly. And I'm dating this hippie girl in Ocean Beach where I was living, and she had never cut her hair. She never shaved her legs. I used to brush her leg hair like a little kitten, and I love you so much. I'm so grateful for you. And her name was Kimba, like the Lion King. And anyway, we moved to LA, and I was 18. I moved to LA to, I always played music my whole life, and I'm like, I'm going to try this thing out. I moved to LA, and so that's the what it used to be like part, and the what happened part is I got fired from Aardvarks. Kimba left me for my drinking. I came up with a plan that I was going to. My roommates had won tickets to see The Cure in San Diego, so I stole my roommate's car and I sold these tickets, and it's my third day drunk. I was going to go see this goth band and get depressed enough to kill myself, and that was my plan. And I'm driving to San Diego, and instead it's my third day drunk. I'd been to jail in Rosarito, I'd been to jail in Santa Barbara, and I get pulled over on the way to San Diego, and I get a DUI. And the judge the next day said, you can stay in jail or you can go to an AA meeting, and that was February 19th of 1989, and I went to that meeting, and the first speaker I ever heard, he said, I'm not much, but I'm all I think about. And I was like, dude, how'd you know? And I went Hollywood Late Night, became my home group, where it's like if I could take my brain out as a newcomer and look at it, that's exactly what the room looked like. It was just like this. I mean, it was all people my age, all these young, young people, rock stars and movie stars. And I was like, this is not what I thought AA was on any level. And I just kept going to meetings, and I ended up getting that job on the promenade. I found my people at Mario's. And, this guy, Bob Horrigan, started the meeting, and he's no longer with us. But he used to always say, when I met him, he was probably mid-70s, and he would always say, my name's Bob. I may not look like one, but I'm an alcoholic. And I would just look at this guy and I'd think, I've never seen anyone that looks more like an alcoholic than you, Bob. This guy. And all these guys, they would share this stuff that was like so wrong. But I guess we're in an era now where I guess it's probably okay to say shit again. I don't know, maybe. Maybe not. We'll leave that alone. Except this one guy, Carl, man. He said that to the newcomer, you're chasing these women. It's just like the beaver trail leads to wine country, is what he would say, and we'd just be like, Carl, like, what is wrong with you? I didn't say it. I was just telling you what Carl said. These guys would just, all these old men they taught me how to be a man. They taught me how to be a man. And I was 5 years sober, and I had gone through my amends list, but the number one on that list was my daughter, Ashley, who I'd never met. And so my sponsor said, it's time to go show up. And, buy her presents on her birthday, buy her presents on Christmas, and just show up. And I showed up for her when she was 8 years old. I took her to the boardwalk in Santa Monica, and we rode all the roller coasters, and I'd never been so scared in my whole life, ever, with this little girl. I was like, what am I going to do? Bought her a little gift, and I just went to the bathroom every 10 minutes. I said the Serenity Prayer. I said, God, please give me the strength just to stay present with this little girl. And, we became friends and started talking and connected, and it got less and less scary the more I hung out with her. And so what happened was I was working the shoe job, and my sponsor, John, said, we get sober to follow our dreams. Follow our dreams, and that's what I did. Every day I would go to work. I would go to Mario's at noon. I would go to work at 2:30. I'd end at 11 p.m. I'd go rehearse in my little band Goldfinger downtown LA. I'd rehearse till 4 in the morning, and then I would rinse and repeat. I'd return all my calls to my sponsees and my sponsor, and before I go to Mario's, and I just do that over and over. And this guy came in one day at the shoe store, and I sold him a pair of 9.5 Oxblood Doc Martens, and I had a demo cassette of my band. And if you don't know what a cassette is, you can fuck off right now. So I had my little demo cassette. I stuck my demo cassette in his shoebox, and he signed me to a record deal the next week. And I gave my 2-week notice. And when I was a kid learning how to play the bass guitar, it wouldn't have been like, number one, how do I become a professional musician? Number one, learn how to play the bass. Number two, get a job at a shoe store. But AA taught me the next indicated action is all I've ever had to do. That's it. The next indicated action. God says yes, not yet. I've got something better in store. Every time. Every single time, and it's like, because of that, I went on tour. We played the show Top of the Pops in Germany. I was talking to my daughter a lot, and I found out her favorite band at the time was Hanson, which wouldn't have been my first choice, but God, whatever, God bless. And we ended up playing the show, and Hanson's on the same show that we are. I'm in Germany, and I knock on their dressing room door, and her favorite guy was Taylor, right? And Taylor answers the door, and I go, hey, man, and I had my European cell phone. Is there any way we could call my daughter? And we call it because of the time difference. She was at school, and he left a message on her answering machine, and he just said, hey, this is Taylor. I just met your dad, and I just want to say, I can't wait to meet you when we play the Bay Area, and I think you're awesome. Her mom gets home, gets the message, calls the school. Principal picks up the phone. What he decides to do is play the message over the PA for the whole school, right? She says she heard the message over the PA. She said she fell out of her chair at school, hysterically crying. She says, to this day, it's the best day of her life, she says to me. She's had 3 kids. It's like, to this day, the best day of her life. It's just like, you never know. Like they say, a living amend, right? Like you never know when these opportunities like present themselves, Is it odd or is it God? And it's just like, I just keep showing up to meetings. My life just keeps getting better. I mean, that's my life experience. I go to meetings and my life gets better. And it's like, I met my wife at the Stone Pony in New Jersey when I was working, and it was like I just had no idea. I had no idea that this, like they say, they say that, our wildest dreams, can come true as long as we don't drink one day at a time and we keep going to AA meetings. And I just didn't know that this life was out there for a guy like me that, hated who he was, I love my life today because I say so. I say it every morning. I say I love my life. And whether I mean it or I don't mean it, I say it anyway. And it's just like, I have this life with I've got a 16-year-old daughter I have a 16-year-old daughter with my wife, now, and she calls me bruh. Hey, bruh. I love her so much. And I got a 19-year-old son with my wife, and he's in college, and it's the craziest thing. It's like, he graduated high school last year, and he's like, I just want to go to Chapman. All of his friends were going to Chapman, and he applied and did all the stuff, and we had all the paperwork, everything, and he didn't get in. And this is my son is so positive and such a happy soul, and I'd never seen him so bummed. And I shared about it at an AA meeting. I just said, my son applied for Chapman, and he didn't get in. And then my friend, because we know all types in AA, my friend JJ, that's in the porno business, he goes, I know a professor at Chapman. And I'm like, no, you don't, dude. No, you don't. Not you. And turns out he did. And he hooked me up with this guy, Joe Rowe, who was a professor at Chapman, also in AA. And he got my son in school, and it's like AA. This is AA. And I don't know. The trajectory of my life isn't some straight line. It's just there's these ups and downs. It's just what life is, But as long as I don't drink, everything works out better than I can imagine. That's been my life experience. It's just like all the stuff that I've been through. It's like, I got this huge job, and I had this big career, and we lived in Bel Air, and this huge life. And then, 1 week, when my son was 9 months old, they, my dad died, and I was there when my dad died. He had all these multiple strokes, and I showed up, and I was holding his hand, saying the Lord's Prayer with my father, who brought me to church every week when I was growing up. And I was saying the Lord's Prayer with my father, who, I had made amends to a multitude of times. And he finally, like on his dying breath, he just said, I forgive you, I forgive you. And that's all I really wanted, from my dad, is like forgiveness for all the stuff I put him through when I was a kid. And, and he died, and our dog died the next day, and then our son was diagnosed with kidney cancer the next day. And it was like, and I lost my job at the record company, and we decided to move to the Valley. And it was like, I went to this meeting in Brentwood, and I shared about it. I shared this old timer. I said, hey man, we're moving from the west side to the Valley. And he goes, the Valley, that's where dreams go to die. That's what he said to me. I'm like, thanks, bro. Helpful. And I remember driving up the 405 to go over to Mario's from Woodland Hills this one day, and I was just so done. I was just done. This is about maybe 17 years ago now, and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm suicidal or homicidal, but I just hate my life, and I just don't know I don't know what to do. I don't know what the next indicated action is. I called my sponsor, or actually I went to Mario's first, and John Robinson, who's no longer with us any longer, he said to me, he goes, it's always darkest right before it turns pitch black, is what he said. And I was driving back home up the 405, and I called my sponsor, and I'm like, dude, I'm not doing well. I am not doing well. I'm like, I'm thinking about ending my life. I'm thinking all these crazy depressive thoughts, and I get to the top of the 405, and it drops the call because I've got AT&T, of course. And I call him back. He goes, oh, I thought you killed yourself. This Kimball's a funny guy. And I call my Al-Anon sponsor, and he said, this is what I want you to do. No matter how you feel, right when you wake up in the morning, I want you to raise your arms to the sky and say, I love my life. And I'm like, dude, in my head, I'm like, it's not in the big book. It's never going to work. I'm not smart enough to trick myself into believing something which isn't true. And my life got darker and smaller and darker and smaller. And one day I was interviewing this kid to intern for me, and he shows up early, and my wife let him in. I just decided to do this thing. I'm in my backyard by my fence, and I'm by myself, and I thought I was by myself, and I was like, I love my life. And this little 17-year-old kid's right there, and he just like scared me. And he's like, hey, I love my life too, you know. And he didn't get the job, but it's like, the truth is that like that was like the first step of me getting out of that hole. I said that out loud, and it was like I made this decision to like, and my son, the doctors were wrong. They took out his kidney, and he had this cyst growing on it that they thought was cancerous that wasn't. And he's had all these learning differences since then, because of all the trauma he went through as a kid with all the surgeries and whatnot. And, and I worry about my kids like every parent worries about their kids. But, I guess 5 years ago, we as a tribute to my father, we go and we see The Sound of Music at the Hollywood Bowl every year because, he loved musicals. And so people dress up like the characters. And my son 5 years ago wanted to dress up like, he said, I want to be a female deer, like the song, right? So I'm like, sure, cool. And we got him this little deer onesie with little antlers, and I put one of my wife's bras on him, and this pink bra. It was awesome. And he gets on stage, and I'm filming him from front of the stage in front of 18,000 people. And he gets interviewed by the MC, and she's like, oh, what's your name? I'm Julian. How old are you? I'm 14 or 13, whatever it was. And she goes, what are you? He goes, I'm a female deer. And everyone laughs. The whole place laughs. And I'm filming, he's got this pink bra on, and I'm right there so proud of this kid, And then she goes, it's a lovely brassiere that you have on, whose is it? He looks right at me, he goes, it's my dad's, And it was like this moment that was just so good. And I've just worried about him that much less, And they say that all we have to do is the next indicated action, and that's all I've done. And I can connect the dots looking backwards. Nobody has a crystal ball. I can't tell what tomorrow holds, but I know that how my life is connected backwards. I see God through all of it. I see God through all of it. God has always had my back, always. And we were in Tijuana drinking with El Diablo when I was this kid. I was 16, wasted with El Diablo, and I pass out, wake up back home. My roommate got kidnapped by El Diablo, tried to put into sex trafficking. I was with my roommate and El Diablo. This shit happened. And yet here I am standing in front of you, sober, with this life unrecognizable that I didn't even know I wanted, but it's beyond anything I can ever describe. I was at the airport with my wife when my kids were really little, about 12 years ago, and this guy sits down next to me at the airport, and he just said, he starts talking to me, and he's this gang member, LA gang member. He's got all his gang tattoos on his face, and he goes, I see my boarding card, he's like, my boarding card says B. I see yours says A. What does that mean? And I said, well, A goes on the plane first, and after that, they'll load B on the plane. And I took out my phone and start fake texting like you do in those awkward situations, right? But he's still talking to me. Are those your kids? I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do they get along? And, I'd been to a meeting that morning to give a friend of mine a cake for 1 year. So I had just enough spirituality in my little spiritual bank up here to just sit there and listen to this man. If they get a toy, how do they agree on who gets to play with it? I just sat there. And I'm like sort of paying attention, just getting ready to board the plane. And then he said, I was in prison for 17 years. I got let out this morning, and you're the first man I'm talking to. That's what he says to me. I put my phone down immediately, and I said, were you in there for drugs? And he said, yes. And I put my hand out, because I'm responsible when anyone anywhere reaches out for help. I want the hand of AA always to be there. For that, I am responsible. And I put out my hand. I said, my name's John, and I'm an alcoholic. And this guy shakes my hand, and he starts crying. He goes, I got sober 9 months ago in prison, and I'm going home to meet my 2 kids who I've never met. And I don't know how to be a sober father. That's what he says to me. He's asking about my kids because he doesn't know what he's doing. And I talked to this man for probably 10 minutes. And I just said, this has been my experience being a sober man and a father. And I just told him my experience, strength and hope. And he got on that plane, and that was 12 years ago. I just didn't, I stayed sober. I didn't see him again. And then they asked me to speak at this convention in Orange County 3 weeks ago. And I always say yes to an AA request, That's not true. That's not. I'll continue. I spoke at this meeting, and it was like this. It was, I don't know, probably 2,000 people, and I spoke and I shared that story, and then everyone lined up to thank me after the meeting, because I'm awesome, right? And they all lined up, and it gets to the end of the line, and it's this guy, and he looks familiar, but he had removed all of his tattoos, and he says, I was the guy at the airport. He said, you saved my life. You saved my life that day. I'm a sober father now, and I haven't been back to prison, and I haven't had a drink since. And, I have a primary purpose today. It's to stay sober so I can carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's not my career. If I put AA first, family second, work third, if I keep my life in that order, everything works out. Everything works out. And I mess it up all the time. I put work first all the time, and I get anxiety and, stressed out. And I put AA first again, and it just works out. But I work with all these people now that, that need this thing. But I don't go in the dark to rescue them. I stand in the light so they can see me. Thank you.
Let's thank our speaker again, John. From Calabasas.